Welcome back to the Bluegrass on this great December day. Before I go to the cabin, we're going to answer a question that I get all the time in the emails, which is, hey Stonnie, I see you doing a lot of food work with dogs, but can I train a dog without using any rewards? Oh, and by the way, I also, I'm not really much of a disciplinarian, so I'd like to not use any punishment either. Okay, let's go. So we're going to answer that question for you real quick. And the answer is, well, it depends on what you mean by training, okay? A big problem that people have, okay, is they let other people define what a well-trained dog is, okay? And ultimately, guys, the only thing that matters at your house is whether or not your dog meets your expectations, okay? So if you want to have a dog and you want the dog to meet your expectations without doing much in the way of formal, like, dog-centric dog training where you're controlling rations or, you're actively influencing the dog consistently on a leash, okay, then the number one rule is this: buy the right dog. It's just that simple. A dog trainer, the vast majority of money made by dog trainers is trying to squeeze square pegs into round holes. Does that make sense, right? Okay, if you buy the right kind of dog for your lifestyle, then the dog is going to adapt. In all the different breeds of dogs, and people really, I think this, I'm gonna make a whole video series on this, but people, they love to research breeds and then buy a dog based on whether or not they have an affinity for that dog's history. Okay, so they'll talk about dogs that were bred for fighting wolves, or dogs that were bred for droving cattle, or herding sheep, or retrieving ducks, and or fish out of the water, whatever, But the reality is, guys, hardly anybody lives those lifestyles. So what you should really be looking for when you go to get a dog is a dog that has a multi-generational history of being able to live in the suburbs and go to soccer games and be happy taking a little walk before work and a little walk after work. Okay, when people buy the exact right dogs for their situations, well, there's not a whole lot of help that they need from a professional dog trainer. Like a lot of my friends here in Central Kentucky have livestock guardian dogs. Okay, well, guess what they do with them? They buy them and then they put them out with the livestock, and that's it. Okay, a lot of my friends who, they're kind of men of leisure, right? So they hunt ducks all season. Geese, well, all they do is they let the dog drag around with them, okay? So if you don't want to have to learn a lot of food work techniques and you don't want to have to learn a lot of old traditional leash and collar stuff, then buy the right dog, and most importantly, live the right lifestyle. Don't buy the dog that you think your lifestyle is going to match maybe in a month or 2 months or maybe in a year. I get this all the time in my online program. People who are living in a house with this teeny yard or an apartment, they want to take my online course and they're like, hey Stonnie, next year I'm going to have a house, or next year I'm going to have a farm, or next year I'm going to live in an environment where there's a lot of dog park. Okay, listen, that's not how life works, right? In reality, life never works out like you want it to, or very rarely, okay? So we have to be honest. So everything starts with an objective evaluation of who you are, where you live, and what kind of dog will actually fit into your lifestyle, okay? So this is a Labrador Retriever, and he belongs to a friend of mine named Shay. And, there's lots of different kinds of Labrador Retrievers bred. Shay did the research, and he found a Labrador Retriever that was low to moderate energy, had a very accepting and giving and friendly disposition, had an exceptionally calm and non-reactive temperament, and came from a bloodline that consistently produces dogs that are awesome house dogs in semi-urban environments. So this dog already in his life has been all over the country, all over the East Coast. And the East Coast is not very friendly for, say, the labs like the one I just got, like Annie, who wants to run all the time and fetch all the time and is super excitable, okay? But they're perfect for this dog. This dog basically, when he goes to a city, okay, his life is just so full of positive reinforcement from everybody that he comes in contact with that, like, there's not a lot of need to do a lot of food work with him. And he has such an easygoing, biddable personality that there's hardly ever any reason to fuss at him, okay? And that's the honest truth. If you don't want to learn much dog training, okay, it's kind of like, If you know, you don't want to learn much mechanicking. If you don't want to learn much mechanicking, then buy the kind of car that never breaks down. Don't be like me and have a whole slew of old cars that you got to work on all the time. If you don't want to learn how to be a carpenter, don't buy you know, a cabin and redo it. Don't buy a house and redo it. And I'm doing both right now, okay? And so every time that I go to get mad because I have to work on my Bronco, or I have to work on my old BMW, or I have to work on my cabin or my other house for where, you know, over in Harrison County, like every time that I get mad, like the only person to be mad at is myself. Nobody forced me to buy any of those things. I bought them all because I thought, wow, I love projects. Well, the next thing you know, the projects all start to line, you know, all start to add up. And my time is, you know, my time is scarce, okay? And so then it becomes stressful. And that's what happens to most people when their dog training's not working for them, right? Is that they just get stressed, okay? And then when they get stressed, like, positive reinforcement work when you're stressed, it doesn't really work, okay? And here's why. It's like the presentation of something positive also has to be positive. I mean, if you went out to dinner and you know, somebody brought you a really nice you know, meal, nice steak or something, but they just plopped it down on the table and they're like, here's your steak. Well, it's gonna, you know, it's gonna affect how that steak tastes. Right? So when people start off with the, hey Stonnie, can I train a dog without using any treats? Well then already in my mind, yeah, you better learn how to do it without treats, because like if you're not a sincere treat giver, it's for sure not gonna work, right? And then when people say, hey, look, can I do it without any treats or without any punishment? Then what I start to think is they don't want to learn any kind of system. They want magic. Okay? And although the internet peddles magic a lot, there's no magic dog training, right? Dogs are pleasure seekers and pain avoiders. So you either got to figure out a way to make them understand that coming and being still and having good manners or whatever it is that you want from them leads to good things, or failing to do so leads to bad things. And that's it, in a bucket. That's all you got, right? Minus the one caveat of picking the exact right dog for your situation, right? If you're the kind of person that when you go out in real life, people follow you around and look at you and say, hey, where are we going? What should we be doing? Can I do things to make you happy? Can I wash your car? Can I come over to your house and clean your dishes? Can I vacuum your floor? Right? If you're that kind of person, right, well then that's probably going to be the kind of dog trainer you are. But if you're not the kind of person that walks around the real world and people follow you around and stare at you and look at you and act like you're important and ask if they can do things for you, regardless of what they want to do in the moment, you gotta learn you a dog training system, okay? So the food work systems are always the easiest to learn because it does two things. Number one, the dog's motivated to look at you because it needs its food. Number two, it reminds you to look for the good in the dog. You're always looking to reward the dog. And if you got a dog looking at you and you're looking at the dog, well then you two are probably going to do a pretty good job of learning to get along together. So food work programs facilitate you know, relationships, especially if started in the formative stages of training, like say 8 to 16 weeks. However, what you're seeing on YouTube a lot of now is not food work in terms of training a dog, in terms of creating a habitual set of behavioral patterns, right? What you're seeing is a lot of people who are doing food work as a management technique. And you'll see that all the time. It would be like if I'm leading this dog through the course and I have a big like hunk of food in my hand, or I have a vest with a ball in it. And you see me doing that all the time, right? Well, I've got the dogs here, I've got my vest on, I've got all that cool stuff. Guys, in my program, or in, you know, people who like do a lot of actual real life stuff, that's a very small percentage of the overall training process. That's the part of the training process where we're teaching the dog to look for the good in the handler, and we're teaching the handler to look for the good in the dog. And most importantly, if you want to make it real simple, the training exercises are designed to help people learn how to influence dogs and how to help dogs be influenced, right? It's that simple. Now, if you don't want to do food work, then there is a simple and better way to do it, but it requires a high degree of total training volume, okay? So every system, every approach has, you know, pluses and minuses. The absolute best kind of dog training is to pick the right dog and then do what we call bum training. Back up and look at that dog. Look. This dog here, This dog here is the center of its owner's world, right? And so it likes the cameraman, and it's following the cameraman around, getting under her feet and barking at her whenever she's not paying attention to him, right? So that's the exact right kind of dog that no training had to be done with it in particular, other than living with it and constantly paying attention to it. Is that your life? Can you get a dog who requires constant attention all day long? Because if you can, you don't really need much. Right, you know, if you want to, you know, like one of my favorite kind of dogs that you'll never see hardly on my channel, because when people call me, I tell them they train themselves, is Australian cattle dog. A good Australian cattle dog doesn't need me, right? Okay, it needs to ride on the back of a farrier's truck and go from farm to farm and learn by doing. Farriers are interesting people, right? They do interesting things, they go into interesting environments, and that total training volume of dragging the dog around with them all day long, okay, that does all the dog training that needs to be done. Okay? Same thing with a good hunting dog. You know, you see lots and lots and lots and lots of videos about, you know, various types of retriever training, okay? But guys actually hunt with dogs a lot. You know, they don't do a lot of training. Like, you know, people talk about breed standards and whatever, especially with the Labradors, the Golden Retrievers. They say, oh, it's such a shame that the dogs aren't hunting dogs anymore. Well, how many of you are Earls? How many of you are Archdukes? You know, how many of you have giant estates where you have kennels full of dog and tons of game to hunt all the time, right? Because if you are an Earl and you have a giant, you know, a giant, I don't even know what Earls have, like a giant section of land somewhere, right? Okay, then all you got to do is take your Golden Retriever or your Labrador Retriever or your Flushing dogs or your Pointers out every day and let them do what they were bred to do, right? Okay, but if you're not an Earl, and you live over here in a subdivision three miles over, and you've got a German Short-Hair Pointer, well, you're probably going to either have to be the most interesting person in the world, or you're going to have to get you some food, or you're going to have to be willing to be a little bit of a disciplinarian. And I mean, that's it, right? Okay. If we get back to our simple concepts of dogs are pleasure seekers and pain avoiders, watch out, go on, dogs. Oh, go on. When I put this leash on this dog, right, I have to have a reason for him to want to comply. If I'm lucky, that reason is I'm the most interesting person in the world to this dog, and that does happen, guys. The best dog owner relationships in the world are just like the best person relationships in the world. You just get two people and they match up well and they get along and they stay happily married forever. I mean, it's awesome, right? Okay, that doesn't happen all the time though, right? I see people and dogs that have such an affinity for each other that it's almost like the dog can read the owner's mind. And the dog just happens to love everything that the owner does, and the owner just happens to love everything that the dog does. So the treat's pretty unnecessary, right? The corrections are unnecessary because the dog does all the stuff the owner wants. It doesn't do anything that's dangerous, destructive, or rude, okay? That's a round hole going into, a round peg going in a round hole, or a square peg going in a square hole, okay? And sometimes you get that. Sometimes you do not get that. Look at this dog. This dog, I mean, basically, to me, he's perfect. He's easy. I could keep 60 of these dogs a month and not even break a sweat, okay? But where he lives, he just does not fit the mold of the owner's ideal dog for some reason. You know, just a weird little bit of friction. And I'm sure you've known people like this, where it's a really awesome guy married to a really awesome girl, and for some reason, they just didn't get along perfectly. And so they have to go to a relationship counselor. Well, that's what I am for dogs. I'm a relationship counselor, right? And so what I teach the dog, like this dog lives in a really awesome place. And so what I tell him is I say, some of the things that you do naturally, it doesn't fit in where you live. And he's like, but Stonnie, it fits in where I live when I'm hanging out with you. I'm like, yeah, okay. That's the way it is. Life's not fair. You're going to have to make some adaptations, right? Okay. And when we send him home, he's going to do perfectly. Could he have never come here? Yeah, if he lived with somebody else. Really is that simple. You know, I see it all the time. People send me dogs that if they lived here with me, I wouldn't ever tell them what to do, not once a day, right? Like my own dogs, once they get to a certain level of training, I never tell them what to do. I don't even consider a dog. If you have to tell a dog what to do, to me, that means that the dog by default didn't make the right decision. I'm into raising dogs that make good decisions, not that need to be told what to do. Okay? But sometimes the dog's right decision and the owner's right decision doesn't match up perfectly, and that's where you have to add in that extrinsic motivation. So you either have to give the dog a reason to do something, or you have to give the dog a reason not to do something, okay? And you're just not going to escape that unless, okay, you're just willing to do bum training or really increase your total training volume and drag the dog around with you enough so that they can learn by doing. When in doubt, do more. Go for more walks. Go for more adventures. Take the dog into different environments. Let them have more experience with more dogs, more people, more other animals, more everything, okay? And let the dog just learn by doing. So in those cases, you don't have to be super active with your rewards, okay? You don't have to like buck up and all of a sudden become a disciplinarian. You'll have to physically manage the dog so that they can have experiences that you have engineered to have good or bad results. And let the dog learn by doing. That takes a lot of forethought and takes a lot of work, and most importantly, it takes a whole lot of time, okay? But we do it here. I mean, so if we do it here, you can do it where you live. You know, I constantly am taking these dogs and putting them in positions where they can climb something, or they can go down a creek bank, or they can go on a log, and they can fall off. And when they fall off, I look at them, I'm like, hey, what happened, boss? And they're like, well, I was trying to do something and it hurt. I say, wow, don't do that, right? So simple. I didn't have to punish them. I let them get out, live real life. And while they were living real life, they get feedback. Because that's the great thing about real life, is it provides you feedback. You know, like if you're in business, like, you know, and you do a good job, more people come. You do not a very good job, then less people come. Okay, that's the same thing with this dog. You know, this dog here, listen, I let lots of people walk him every day. I take him all over the country with me, and like, I let him learn by doing, you know. I'll put him in situations sometimes with a lot of other dogs, and, you know, the other dogs are a little bit more calm than George maybe, not quite as oral, and, you know, George's not getting as much attention, so he has to adjust his own behavior to get attention. Learning by doing. I call it bum training, you know, because if you ever see a bum with a dog, one thing you will notice is that the dog always minds good because the bum and the dog spend all day together, okay? In other words, they have high total training value. Volume, right? Total training volume is one of the least talked about concepts in dog training, and the reason it's not talked about that much is because like people don't have time, or really, I guess the more honest thing to say is that they don't want to make time to influence their dogs, okay? So just to recap, guys, if you don't have much time and you didn't choose the perfect dog for your life, and you're not the most interesting person in the world, you better learn you a food work system, okay, or you better learn to be a disciplinarian. And that's the bottom line, you know, because that's the only time-efficient ways to influence a dog, right? And what's your job? Is to learn how to influence the dog and to teach the dog how to be influenced. That's really easy with food work, and it's not really very hard using traditional training if you can find a person who's actually well-versed in traditional training techniques. You're kind of seeing a resurgence of what we used to call the yank and crankers. You got dummies on the internet that if a dog's acting like a little bit antisocial or something, they're jerking the dog and the dog's whole body's getting like flexed in and giving a dog whiplash. Stay away from those ham and eggers, because you ain't learning anything. All you're doing is going hanging out with them, and they're the kind of person that can, you know, kind of be ornery with the dog, and the dog recognizes that pretty quickly. Right? And the dog says, oh, around this guy, he'll jerk my head off, so I'll be good. That ain't gonna work for you when you get home, so just don't even do it. A good leash and collar trainer will put you on a progression, and it'll be a 6 to 8 months progression where they work you through the different training aids used to use old-fashioned corrective techniques efficiently and effectively, and show you how to wean off of those training aids. Always remember, if you're doing traditional training, or even if you're doing food work training, those training aids are meant to be used like training wheels on a bike. You use them until you don't need them, and then put them away forever, okay? Now, that's what I think. That's what I think. I like, you know, either be the most interesting person you can be, right? Okay, first off, well, pick the right dog. Be the most interesting person you can be. Get a ton of total training volume. Be a bum. Don't be afraid to just go out and explore the world and not let other people define what obedience training is. All obedience training is, from my perspective, is if I see you downtown, your dog doesn't bother me. And that's all anybody in the world cares about, is that your dog doesn't bother them, right? Okay. And then I think, like, don't be worried about getting your hands dirty and doing a little bit of treat work. Okay, there's nothing wrong with it. And it's really easy. It gets the dogs looking at you. It gets you looking at the dogs. Everybody's looking for the good in each other. It's a great training tool. Everybody will help you do it. Everybody will give your dog a treat. Okay. Punishment works. Been more dogs trained using traditional leash and collar work than all other techniques combined. Okay, but you ain't getting anybody else to help you do it. That's a big problem with it, right? We used to live in more of a discipline-based society. We don't live in a discipline-based society anymore. So if you said, hey, if my dog does something, would you mind jerking his leash? Ain't nobody helping you with that. If you said, hey, if my dog does good, would you mind throwing him a treat? I mean, pretty much everybody will do that, you know. So that's what I think. And I know that was a long-winded answer to, you know, whether or not you can train your dog without using treats and without using punishment. But it's kind of one of those, you know, it's kind of one of those topics where I could make probably 10 or 15 hours of content using demonstrations very simply. You know, if you want to see that, comment below and maybe I'll make some more video exploring the topics in further detail. See y'all next week.